Hello everyone, DarkOfAllTrades here. Today, I'm gonna go back to morality.
Oh, there goes Rabbity.
For this, I'm going to be responding to Chris Conti's video titled Atheist Moral Code. I decided to address this video pretty quickly, as there seems to often be some confusion on the part of the religious, typically Christian, persons and concerning morality. They seem to be under the impression that since they think that their morality comes from their God, if we don't believe in a God, or if no God exists, then we cannot be moral. So let's dive right in and see what Chris has to say.
I think it's quite interesting how you see atheists on the warpath to defend their atheism like it's a belief. Like if they didn't have any belief of anything, why would they care?
This is a weird phrase. When you say warpath, what do you mean? Are you asserting that there are atheists who take, quote, a hostile or combative course of action or have such a frame of mind? To be clear, atheism is a rejection of a single proposition, that is, some number of gods exist. It is not necessarily a belief. It is a lack of belief. If I reject one proposition, that does not tell you anything about what I do believe. It is a response. So, if atheists are, quote, on the warpath, then ask yourself, why are they responding in such a manner? If religion was benign or had little to no impact on the lives of atheists or those around them, then it would be difficult to argue that atheists would be combative about the issue. Instead, religious beliefs affect how people vote and are motivations for laws in many countries, including the United States. This means that other people's religious beliefs affect me, which should not happen. So, it should be at least a little understandable that atheists would be a little confrontational about the legislation based on unproven and untestable ideas. As for his point of, if they didn't have a belief in anything, find me a single person who literally doesn't believe in anything. If someone didn't believe in anything, then that would include their own existence, or that the voices they hear when someone speaks to them are real. It is an entirely incoherent worldview to put onto anyone. Me not believing in the single proposition of your belief about a deity does not mean that I don't believe in anything. I believe in existence and love and wind, flowers, springtime, bacon, YouTube, my adorable corgi, and that the majority of people in the world do their best to be as good of people as they can be, as well as many more things. Literally no one doesn't have a belief in anything.
But it is a belief system.
No, it isn't. Again, if I reject one proposition, it tells you absolutely nothing about what I do accept. Also, even if I grant the hard atheist or anti-theist position, which I do take, it tells you nothing about my belief system. It is a single belief and not an entire belief system. I know atheists who believe in ghosts and other supernatural things. I know atheists who have a very different moral system than I do. Atheists are not one monolithic group. The only thing required for one to be an atheist is to not believe a God exists. Every other belief falls into a different category. My belief system would be considered secular humanist.
And they feel like they have to defend that because of all the immorality that it specifically promotes.
Well, this would depend on what you mean by morality. In my worldview or belief system, morality is based on the well-being of sentient creatures. We make evaluations based on that criteria. Nothing about the rejection of a God promotes anything immoral. I cannot wait for you to explain why you think it does. Also, I feel like I'm saying this more often than I should be. You don't know my motives for doing anything, let alone, quote, defending my belief system, end quote. For you to tell anyone that you know what's going on in their head is insulting. You wouldn't like it if I told people that the reason you try to attack atheism is that you are a secret atheist and you're trying to convince yourself to keep believing, would you? If that explanation were not the case, then I would lose all sorts of credibility with you, right? Rather than just asking an atheist, why do you feel the need to defend atheism, you go out of your way to pretend to be a mind reader. Well, you certainly aren't. I am an amateur magician, and I promise you that I am far better at pretending to read minds than you are.
No, when I say immorality, I'm judging by the moral ethics of Judeo-Christian ethos that's built into Western society.
Oh good, something resembling a standard. Well, it really isn't much of one. What exactly is Judeo-Christian ethics? Seriously, look it up sometime. Especially pay attention to the criticisms of the concept as well. Defining Judeo-Christian ethics, it is basically referring to the value system common to Jews and Christians. While there may be perceptions of influence, Andrew Seidel, a constitutional and civil rights attorney and author of the book The Founding Myth, addresses this idea that America was founded on these values and shows this to not be the case. If you start with the belief that a God is necessary for morality, then of course not having a God would not be moral. Of course, you need to demonstrate that a God is necessary for morality and not just assert it.
And it seems that secularism really has promoted every single sort of, how would you say, debauchery.
Really? Every single sort of debauchery? Citation needed. What is debauchery? Debauchery is excessive indulgence in sensual pleasures. How does secularism promote anything excessive, let alone excessive indulgence in sensual pleasures? Yet again, not believing in a God does not mean you promote anything at all. One can be entirely secular and think that everyone should detach themselves from earthly ideals. Many Buddhists think this way, yet still do not believe in a God. I'm not entirely sure what Chris here thinks the term secularism is. For expedience sake, secularism is the principle of seeking to conduct human affairs based on secular, naturalistic considerations. This does not mean that ideals that coincide with a religious ideal are rejected. In secularism, one could say we should treat each other with kindness. While some would argue that this could be in a religious text as well, it can still be secular based on the idea that people tend to live better lives when they're treated with kindness. No God or religion required.
And then they use, you get 5 pages long, like the comments of 5 pages long of like random, well, I don't have any proof that there is a God. Well, you don't have any proof that there isn't.
You are the one making the claim that a God exists. Atheists don't accept your claim, and the reason given, as you say, is that they don't have any proof that there is a God, which is an entirely fair reason to not accept your claim. You have not met your burden of proof. To try to turn it around and say, you don't have any proof against my claim, is a basic example of a fallacy called shifting the burden of proof. I talked about the idea of proof there isn't a God in my video responding to Capturing Christianity. In order to properly address this, I need to know what Chris means by proof and what he means by God. If he's referring to the colloquial meaning of proof to be something used to help establish something as true or likely true, and the God being the being referred to in the Bible, then yes, we do have proof that there isn't a God. We have proof that there isn't a God just like we have proof there isn't an elephant in the bathtub, or there isn't a Spider-Man. We use examples like Russell's teapot or Sagan's dragon in the garage. These are just baseline examples. When we start to investigate the biblical character, we can find contradictory characteristics. See the Omni paradox for more information on why this type of God cannot exist.
It's simple. The main proof is the existence of life, the design of life.
How is the existence of life proof of God? Asserting that life is designed smuggles in a designer. You need to show that life was actually designed rather than asserting that it was. This gets to Paley's watchmaker argument, which is flawed mainly because it assumes that we can distinguish design from something not designed, but without something not designed, we have no point of comparison. If your God designed everything, then nothing is undesigned. Therefore, we have no way of determining the difference between something designed and something not designed. So, you need to show a designer before you can assert that something is designed. Now, before I get any comments or emails about this, with things like a watch, we have shown that a watch has a designer because we can show examples of someone designing a watch. We don't have that same evidence for current life. And even if we did, we don't have sufficient evidence to warrant the belief that life could not have arisen naturally, which is where the evidence points.
The fact that science can't reproduce these things in a lab.
This is not true. Since the Miller-Urey experiment, we have shown that we could form several of the protein precursors necessary for life on Earth. This is back in 1953. That's nearly 70 years ago. In 2016, the J. Craig Venter Institute in San Diego, California, announced that they have created synthetic minimal cells. In May of 2019, researchers at the Medical Research Council Laboratory of Molecular Biology in Britain announced that scientists have created a living organism whose DNA is entirely human-made. Links to the articles of both of these are in the description. So yes, we can make life in the lab. Even if we couldn't, the flaw in the argument here is that just because humans currently can't do something doesn't mean it is impossible for it to happen outside of a god. How did you rule out technologically advanced aliens? How did you rule out natural processes? This is an example of an argument from ignorance fallacy. It effectively says, we don't know how this happened, so it must be God. Even with this information, Chris could move the goalposts by saying, well, humans are intelligent and they made life, therefore it takes intelligence to make life. Therefore it must have been made by something intelligent. This has its own problems, including the argument from ignorance. Since he isn't making this point, I'm not going to dive deep into it. If there's interest, let me know and I can make a video addressing this topic.
Something basically came from nothing.
Did it really? What do you mean by nothing? I'm guessing when you mean nothing, you mean not anything. This is not what physicists mean when they say nothing. This is a pretty complicated topic, so check out Lawrence Krauss's book, A Universe from Nothing, for more details about this. So, literally no one is asserting that something came from nothing, by your definition. Nothing can't be. Nothing does not have properties and therefore cannot exist. How did you determine that there was even a nothing to begin with? Perhaps something is the default state. That's pretty close to what you believe anyway. You can accept your God always existed, but you can't grant that something else existed because reasons? Some sweet special pleading, bro.
Life does not come from non-life.
Prove it. Prove that it is and was impossible for life to come from non-life, especially when we know that it can. Again, we've known that it is possible for around 70 years. You're way behind on your arguments.
That's what we know. So how did these things just randomly happen? But you can't answer that. That is the exact reason why theologians believe in the existence of a higher being, because you can't reproduce that.
Well, I wouldn't assert that it is random, but I can answer that. However, for this section, let me grant that. I don't know how life came to exist. I don't know how the Big Bang happened. So what? My inability to give you an explanation does not mean your made-up reason wins by default. If you say a God exists, you need to show that a God exists. Not that we don't know how this happened, therefore God. This is a God of the gaps argument.
And there's just same amount of evidence on both sides. But
No, there isn't. I would love for him to lay out what he thinks is the evidence on both sides. Seriously, take a piece of paper and make a line down the middle and put evidence for God on one side and evidence for no God on the other, and start laying out the evidence. We know that natural processes can produce different results. We have countless examples of nature doing things, including developing new life. Do we have a single confirmed example of a God doing literally anything? We don't. Not a single confirmed thing. So don't try to pretend that your lack of evidence is the same as my evidence against your proposition.
here's the main difference. One is a foundational principle of morality that you see if people follow.
Okay, I know he's trying to say that a belief in a God is the foundation for morality, but this certainly is not the case. Even granting that it is an arbitrary foundation. He has no demonstration that his God exists, nor does he know any properties of his God, and he especially doesn't know what his God wants. At absolute best, even granting that some God exists, all he has is something that some anonymous people wrote about what they thought about their God. He doesn't know what his God thinks. If the Bible were 100% true, which is impossible, but granting that it is accurate about what his God thinks, then he definitely doesn't follow it. His God approves of, and in some cases demands, genocide, including that of children. How can the genocide of entire populations of children be moral? If you agree with me that it is not moral in any realistic circumstance, then you, like me, are more moral than your God. If you don't, then I implore you to seek help.
I'll use the example of, I don't know, single motherhood. Following the Bible code, you should wait for sex before marriage. Essentially, there wouldn't be any single motherhood.
What? There wouldn't be any single mothers if there was no sex before marriage? Really? Is he saying that fathers wouldn't die? Is he saying that there would be no divorce? Well, that one is possible if you follow the Bible strictly. Is he saying that forcing... Okay, I need to stop. Give me a second. I need to try to frame this in the most charitable way possible. If he is specifically saying that if no one had sex before marriage, then there wouldn't be any single mothers before marriage, then sure, I can mostly agree with that, excluding situations like sexual assault. However, there would still be single mothers as people die of diseases, in wars and accidents, or a myriad of ways, which would lead to there being a single parent. He's focused on motherhood for some reason, but realistically, single-parent households exist, and in many cases are better situations than if the mother and father stayed together. There are a myriad of reasons to have sex with your long-term partner before you're married. There are reasons why you should have sex with other people as well before you get married. In fact, abstinence-only education is incredibly harmful and unethical. I'll put a link in the description for more reading on this subject.
It avoids the whole idea of abortion.
No, it doesn't. There are many reasons why one may get an abortion. One major reason, which even many pro-life people accept, is when not getting an abortion would cause the pregnant person to lose their life. Medical necessity. If you say that one person should never get an abortion, even at the cost of that person's life, then you are immoral by definition. You are asserting that it is better for a mother and her unborn child to die naturally, rather than us humans doing what we can to save one of them, tragically at the cost of the other. So, either it doesn't avoid the whole idea of abortion, or you're okay with allowing people to die from very preventable issues. Take your pick.
It also would force monogamy, force fathers to be together with their wives and produce a family, where essentially which would avoid all poverty.
I think this is what he said. He mumbled at the end there, making it a challenge to understand his point. However, let me touch on what I think for just a moment. We shouldn't be forcing people to do things they don't want to do, and that includes starting a family. If someone decides to get married and doesn't want children, are they not a family? If two people get married and one of them turns physically abusive to the point where the other person's life is in danger, should they be forced to stay together by your standards? However, let's get to the other point. Let's say that these two people are happily married. How does that avoid all poverty? I know many Christian couples who are married and yet still live in poverty. I know families who live together but in poverty. How does forcing a father to be together with his wife avoid poverty? In many places in the US, having two incomes helps, but is not a guarantee that you won't live in poverty.
The other line of reason doesn't have any of that. It's just there is no moral code. You just get what you get. Whatever happens, happens.
Well, this is a ball of vague. I am a secular humanist. In my morality or moral code, I focus on the well-being of humans and other thinking creatures as my foundation. In secular humanism, we don't assert that there should be no sex before marriage because the evidence suggests there are numerous benefits, and the benefits of waiting don't outweigh the benefits of not waiting for the majority of people, so to force others to wait goes against their human well-being. We also don't force fathers to be together with their wives. We know that trapping people in abusive relationships is detrimental to human well-being. We know that it also decreases the well-being of societies as a whole. It is a clear moral code with a clear foundation on which we can make objective assessments as to whether something is moral, immoral, or amoral. I can show you whether something generally increases well-being or not. Can you show me your God?
I guess I'm more specifically annoyed that they want to pretend like it's not a belief system.
Atheism is not a belief system. Secular humanism may be a belief system, but one can believe that a God exists and still be a secular humanist. There are also atheists who are not secular humanists. You're mixing up your terms here. Secularism and atheism are not the same thing.
You don't need to defend a non-belief in something. That's just a fact. If you don't believe it, you don't believe it.
Perhaps you're correct here. However, when the belief that something causes as much harm as the belief in a God has caused, then we aren't defending the non-belief, we're defending against your vile belief.
Yet I continue to see a 50-page long message on my channel saying, hey, I believe in this and there's no logical reasons why you should ever believe in God, whatever. But there's no logical reasons that you shouldn't believe in God. Some of this is faith. And that being said, what we do have is a book that has historical historical validity through archaeology, and we have eyewitness accounts.
What does the historical validity through archaeology or the eyewitness accounts have to do with morality? The accuracy of an archaeological claim in a book has no bearing on whether anything else in the book actually happened. The common response to this claim is that in 1,000 years, if someone digs up a Spider-Man comic, well, we know that New York existed. Does that mean Spider-Man also existed? We even have eyewitness accounts in the comics. As for these eyewitnesses, to which eyewitnesses are you referring? Most of the Bible is anonymous. Even the letters of Paul don't give much insight other than, this is what you should do. There are no eyewitness accounts to anyone seeing a risen Jesus. Paul claims to have seen a light, but the people around him don't see this light. So even if I grant literally every single mundane claim in the Bible, you are no closer to proving the supernatural claims.
To the point where there's been a ridiculous amount of critics of the Bible, to the point where they believe that Isaiah had to be written two different times because it was so accurate in predicting the Messiah.
If this were the case, then why don't the Jewish population as a whole generally accept Jesus as the Messiah? Well, putting that aside, let's just look at the verses. Isaiah 7:14 says, "The young woman shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel." This says that the Messiah's name would be Emmanuel and not Yeshua or Jesus. So already we have one strike. According to the notable biblical scholar Bart Ehrman, when talking about Isaiah, quote, "Read the passages carefully and find where there is any reference in them to a Messiah," end quote. He continues saying, quote, "These passages are not talking about the Messiah. The Messiah is never mentioned in them. Anyone who thinks they are talking about the Messiah has to import the Messiah into the passages because he simply isn't there. I should stress that no one prior to Christianity took these passages to refer to a future Messiah," end quote. A link to this is in the description. That's strike two. Finally, for this, let's look at some of the very basic facts that Christians believe came from Isaiah. Setting aside the mythicist position for a moment, assuming that there was a guy named Jesus who lived and died around 4 BCE to 33 CE, how do we know this person fulfilled prophecy? What source do we have to show that this fellow did anything at all that was predicted in Isaiah? That's right, just from the Bible. Specifically, the Gospels, which we don't know when they were written, though we do have some guesses, estimating that the earliest Gospel written, Mark, was written around 70 CE, some 47 years after the accounts. We don't have the originals, and we don't even know who actually wrote them, so we have no contemporary secular sources for any Messiah, let alone from the Bible. The question to ask then is it more likely that the authors had access to the Old Testament and wrote down things that affirmed what they thought the Old Testament said about a Messiah, or that there is a supernatural explanation? I'll even grant that they honestly believed it happened just like Isaiah said. However, you would have to say that it is more likely that literal magic is real when it is possible that the authors were just honestly mistaken, especially knowing that the Gospels have a fair portion that is copied off of each other. A completely natural explanation. I don't believe you. Strike 3, you're out.
I'll see you in the next one. Please like, subscribe, continue to pray, and continue to read the Bible.
Maybe people should continue to read the Bible. By doing that, I took my first steps to becoming an atheist. Reading the Bible was what eventually led me out of Christianity. All I knew about the Bible was whatever my pastors would read. It wasn't until I studied to become a pastor myself that I read the rest of the Bible. And that is what brought me to where I am today. That's it for today. Did Chris come up with any true points about atheism at all? No. Did he provide any arguments that were not discredited around 70 years ago? No. Did he provide any evidence at all that anything he said was true? No. He didn't even provide a single Bible verse or anything as a defense for his own position. He made a lot of claims with no supporting evidence. I watched about the first minute of this 5 minute and 41 seconds long video before I decided to do this response. He made so many points in less than 6 minutes that even though he repeats himself in some of his points, addressing the lion's share of them took this long. This just shows you the power of the Gish Gallop. I think I hit all of the remotely relevant points, but if you want me to dive deeper into any of these points, let me know in the comments. As per usual, Chris Conti, if you're interested in having a discussion about any of these points, or about what you believe, or even what I believe, I would be happy to open a dialogue with you. I would be happy to clarify any points that don't make sense to you, and I would love to answer any questions you may have. You can leave me a comment or send me an email at the address in the description if you're interested. For everyone else, thank you so much for checking me out today. Do you think I nailed it here, or do you think I missed the mark? Let me know in the comments below. How would you have addressed Chris's points differently? I've been talking about morality for a while now, and understanding more than just what is morality has been a really interesting and fun learning experience. I highly recommend Matt Dillahunty's talk on the superiority of secular morality if you would like a more in-depth talk about what secular morality is compared to religious-based morality. Thanks for hitting that like button and subscribing. It is the moral thing to do as it promotes the well-being of humans. Remember to keep learning.